And podcast series of Business of Cannabis. Find out all that we do at businessofcannabis.com. Coming up on B of C Live, a conversation with Jeffrey Harold. He is the CEO of Garden Remedies, a Massachusetts-based producer and vertically integrated company. We want to talk to him about their footprint, about how unique Massachusetts is, and where they might be headed next. Jeff, thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me.
Anybody that has Massachusetts over their right shoulder, I would have on almost any time.
Love it.
I'm from Natick, and I was telling you before we came on that my first legal cannabis purchase in Massachusetts was at one of the Garden Remedies in Marlborough. That was my first purchase. It'll always be my first purchase. I saved the receipt.
Love it. Come back again.
I will. And maybe that's where we start. Like when I bought, I don't even remember what year it was, but the Massachusetts industry has grown. Like, tell us the startup story, sort of how you got into it and sort of your relative size now.
Yeah, the company was actually founded in 2013 by Dr. Munkesi. So she's a board certified anesthesiologist, breast cancer survivor, really got into the industry from the advocacy side and, helped get a lot of bills and things passed in Massachusetts to kind of get the industry to where it is today. Started with a couple of grow rooms and, one dispensary in Newton, Mass back in the medical days. I started with the company when we had about 30 employees, still in that world to now, we have 3 stores. So Marlborough, Melrose, and Newton. And then we have a cultivation out in Fitchburg. So we're vertically integrated. So Dr. Munkesi kind of got into this under the sense that she went out to California, she traveled a lot, kind of saw the industry and thought there was a way to really professionalize it and kind of bring it to the next realm. So we take everything, very seriously from a repeatability, from a compliance, safety, quality perspective. We love to give tours of our facility because everyone kind of comes in, I think, expecting a bunch of people in Birkenstocks and tie-dye t-shirts, and they walk around and there's some people with real educations and backgrounds and real scientists and horticulturalists and all that good stuff.
Well, it's interesting. I often say that Massachusetts. I'm in Toronto. Massachusetts is certainly from a governance perspective and a regulatory perspective is super strict, like Canada is, and that's what you see when you take tours here. Is clean suits and it's like a good manufacturing practice type of environment, which I think it does surprise people, but also the relative scale of what they see, and very few people have seen that much cannabis being grown at any one time, which is unique. And talk a little about it because you are you're in a single state, you're in Massachusetts. Talk about sort of that advantage it gives you because the regulatory environment, which is hyper strict in Massachusetts, which is different and apart from what's about to happen in Connecticut, New York, and other places. Like, does that give you an advantage as you sort of scale out in Massachusetts and maybe look beyond?
I think first and foremost, we always treat it like it's an even playing field, right? Like everyone else has to play by these rules in Massachusetts, so we can't really like get down when a new rule comes out that we don't like, because essentially it makes things even. I think operating in Massachusetts does give us an advantage in the sense that when you can operate successfully in a complicated market like this, I think it gives you a lot of ability, right? Like it's never going to be this hard. We've learned a lot of things now that we can easily apply. And I think what you do see in general is a lot of states are starting to copy what Massachusetts has done and starting to build out their regulatory process very similar. So for us, we think that's an advantage, right? We know the rules, but also, we're flexible. We think we can adapt to anything that they throw at us. When you talk about Massachusetts, I think a lot of the early regulations were actually to set us up for failure, right? This is make it too difficult so no one could ever do it. And you got to love the industry and the people in it because the ingenuity, we figured it out, right? Pass the testing standards, do everything that they wanted you to do.
And even as much as I think I was reading the regulations, I was home in Natick this summer, and how delivery works now, like to delivery. Talk a little bit about sort of that, because like we have very strict delivery guidelines in Toronto, but these are like way more than that.
Yeah, so we actually launched delivery about 2 months ago for adult use out of our Newton dispensary. So we deliver within 2 hours generally to the greater Boston kind of metro area. Um, it's definitely complicated. I think we're going to see some easing in that world, just because it is, the expense is crazy. They tried to make it early access for social equity aspects, which is great. But also by the rules you were talking about, like they're required to have two people in a vehicle. They have to have body cameras, GPS tracking. There's a whole unmarked vehicle. There's a whole bunch of rules that really make it difficult to operate. So I know they're working on it. I know, the group, Your Green Package that we work with is lobbying to try to turn it around. But yeah, it's difficult to operate. It's definitely difficult to make any money. Two people sitting in a vehicle all day, especially in Boston traffic, makes it pretty hard. Uh,
Yeah. It's like, yeah, if there's any place it's like that, and maybe LA, it's like, it's just people sitting in traffic most of the time. It doesn't
yeah.
lend itself. It's also difficult to get to the 2 hour that you're talking about, but Newton, I mean, just fairly central location, obviously. Um, and talk a little bit about sort of how you see, 'cause you talked about sort of the vertical integration within Massachusetts. Like, are there next horizons where you're saying we could take this model and expand in Massachusetts, we could take it to neighboring states or non-neighboring states that look a lot like the regulatory environment in Massachusetts?
Yeah, I think as a company, we decided pretty early on to focus specifically on Massachusetts. I think if you look at a lot of the MSOs that are out there, they have a lot of flags planted, but they don't really have operations, ingrained in the area, or really a real commitment to the communities and things like that. So we took a different approach. We took a step back and said, look, Massachusetts is going to be, $2.5 billion market. Like, we don't want to get distracted chasing all these other pretty shiny things and leave, not pay attention to what's right in front of us. So we have been focused here. We built out our cultivation, our team, our retail footprint, but we have reached that kind of critical mass where we've got every license you can have essentially in Massachusetts. So now it's, well, where do we go from here? And when we think about growth, it's great. Investors want it, right? And everyone keeps everyone happy. But also, we think we have a unique team over here that if we don't grow, then we don't continue to create opportunities for them, which then maybe they start thinking about going elsewhere, which is the last thing that
Yeah.
we want. But to your original question, we think Garden Remedies is a pretty regional brand, so we'd like to really keep it like Northeast focused, grow on build on the infrastructure that we already have, and kind of expand that way.
Can you talk? I'd love to sort of dive into one more thing, and that is Massachusetts. The cities and towns have enormous power, right? And that differs from state to state, but a lot of the states, this has, the local control is significant. How is working with local municipalities and cities different from like day one to day or year 3 and 4? Like, have they realized that you are good neighbors, that you're great operators? Like, how is that relationship built over time? Because we're looking, we're talking to folks in New York and New Jersey, and they're just on the cusp of cities and towns saying no. But like, I like to project, in 2-3 years after legalization, those same cities are going to start saying yes because they want the tax revenue and the good neighbors. Talk a little about how that relationship has gone.
I think that's what everyone expects. What I'd say is, we're 5 years into this in Massachusetts, and 50% of the communities still are banned, right? Like, there hasn't been very many that I can't even think of one that has flopped from where they are to the other side. Um, uh, it varies based on community, right? A lot of communities have different things that they're focused on. Maybe they're in a tax situation or a job situation that might be more appealing to for new businesses. Others, maybe this is a way down the list of things that they're worried about, and they give you very little time of day. What I can say is, I was in a city council meeting a few weeks back, and there's still people who show up and think cannabis should be illegal, and they like to go on record about it every single time, even if you're there to get a new sign put in your parking lot. They're there to complain about how cannabis should be illegal. So I think it gets easier, right? It's less of, I think being early is tough because early also comes with a lot of volume, which scares people. You know, we're in Newton, and Brookline was one of the first stores to open in Massachusetts. It really shook up the Newton politics because there were lines around the block, traffic was crazy. You know, they thought that that was how it was going to be forever. So they kind of put additional restrictions and things like that on it. But it eases over time. Public perception is still, it's still only, depending on what you look at, 40 to 30% of people, pretty strong objection out there right now. So I think you gotta, in terms of New York, I think you really gotta look at where public opinion is strong to begin with, and really start there.
Yeah.
Because changing people's minds is very difficult in what we,
Especially when you're trying to adhere to regulations, start a business, hire people, cultivate, distribute, manufacture products, all of the deliver, right? If that's really complicated. But I enjoyed sort of hearing the Garden Remedy story, hearing about your story, and hearing about the local city councils in Massachusetts, because that strikes my fancy and sort of my background being from Natick. But I want to thank you for making time, and I look forward to connecting with you down the road and hearing more about sort of the rollout in Massachusetts and how it's going.
Yeah, appreciate it.
Thanks, Jeff. That was Jeffrey Harold, the CEO of Garden Remedies. If you like this program, please rate and review us wherever you heard the show. It helps support the work we do. We're able to do what we do because of ongoing partnerships with Alterna Savings, Cannabis at Work, Cannabis Benchmarks, CanDelta, Gallagher, Headset, and Torque & Mains. Find out all that we do at businessofcannabis.com.